The boardroom was a cathedral of power, a fortress of glass and steel perched high above the city. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Grace Hale, a woman sculpted by ambition and sharpened by betrayal. Her presence filled the room before she spoke. Every line of her tailored suit, every flicker of her dark eyes commanded respect and fear alike. She had risen from the ashes of humiliation to this throne of authority, and tonight the board trembled under her calm, unyielding gaze. But fate had prepared an entrance she had not scripted. The doors slammed open, rattling the room. Executives flinched. Grace's hand froze mid-motion over her papers. And then, like a ghost clawing back into her life, Adrian Cross strode in. His name still tasted like poison on her tongue, but his presence, it ignited the air like a storm rolling across an open sea. Once, Adrian had been untouchable. The golden boy, the company's rising star, her first love, her worst betrayal. Years ago, he had mocked her dreams, humiliated her, and cast her aside when she had been nothing more than an eager assistant with stars in her eyes. His cruelty had broken her. His betrayal had fueled her. And now here he was, walking into her empire with no crown on his head, no kingdom at his back. His suit was rumpled, his face leaner, his pride carved down to bone. Yet there was still that unmistakable aura, the charisma that had once made entire rooms bend toward him. He was no ghost. He was flesh and blood, standing in the place he had once ruled and now begging for scraps. The board erupted in whispers. Grace did not move. Her voice, when it came, was smooth as glass, sharp as a blade. "Well," she said, eyes never leaving his. "The fallen prince returns." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I came here for a reason, Grace. Not for your mockery. The audacity!" The man who had left her in pieces dared to stand here, daring to speak her name as though it still belonged to him. She leaned back, allowing a slow smile that carried no warmth. "Then state your reason quickly. My time is valuable." His voice carried across the boardroom, steadier than she expected. "I'm here to apply for a position. Any position. I don't care what island." A ripple of laughter spread around the table. The great Adrian Cross, reduced to begging for employment like a starving dog. Grace silenced them with a raised hand. Her eyes never broke from his. Inside, her pulse was a drumbeat, a war cry, a memory of nights spent weeping for him. On the surface, she was pure ice. "Any position," she echoed softly. "Even entry level?" "If that's what it takes," he answered. The board broke into smirks. A man once destined for greatness, now willing to crawl. She stood, circling the table slowly, every heel strike echoing like a countdown. When she reached him, she paused only inches away, so close she could feel the heat of him. His scent was different, sharper, edged with struggle. She tilted her head. "You mocked my dreams once. You told me I would never matter. Do you remember that?" His throat worked, but his voice did not falter. "I remember. And now you stand in my office, in my company, asking for mercy?" For the first time, his eyes wavered. A shadow of regret flickered there. But before he could speak, she turned her back, walking to her chair like a queen retreating to her throne. "Very well," she said at last. "We'll give you a chance, starting from the bottom. If you survive, maybe, just maybe, you'll prove yourself useful." The board stirred in disbelief, but none dared challenge her. Adrian bowed his head slightly. Not in gratitude, never that, but in grim acceptance. "Then I'll see you tomorrow." And with that, he left. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Grace sat, her hands steady on the table, her face carved from marble. Only when the board had dispersed, when the glass doors had clicked shut, did she allow her hand to tremble. The past had returned, and it wore Adrian Cross's face. She forced her mind to steel. He had broken her once. He would not break her again. But even as she tried to bury the heat in her chest, the memories clawed their way free. She was 22 again, standing in that same office with a folder clutched to her chest, her heart pounding as she confessed her dream project to him, the man she admired, the man she adored. And he had laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that sliced her open. "Sweetheart," he had said, his words laced with contempt, "you'll never get anywhere with ideas like that. Be realistic. You're an assistant, not a visionary." Then, in front of the others, He had humiliated her further, told her she wasn't worth the company's time. Within days, she was dismissed. The sting of his betrayal had burned into her bones, searing her into someone harder, stronger, merciless. Now here he was, stripped of everything, returning to her court like a dethroned king crawling back. But she would not make the mistake of underestimating him. Adrian Cross was dangerous. A man like that, even broken, still carried fire. Later that night, alone in her office, Grace opened a confidential report slid to her by Marcus, her younger brother and most trusted confidant. His message had been clear. Read this when you're alone. Her eyes skimmed the pages and her blood ran cold. Adrian hadn't lost everything because of bad luck or foolish pride. Someone had sabotaged him, deliberately. His fall was orchestrated, engineered with surgical precision, and the fingerprints belonged to someone inside her own company. Grace closed the files slowly, her pulse a storm. For years she had believed Adrian was her greatest enemy. But now, the possibility that someone else had pulled the strings threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. The past wasn't just back. It was clawing, snarling, demanding answers. And for the first time in years, Grace felt something other than control. She felt the ground shift beneath her empire. Adrian Cross reported for duty the next morning, but the empire he once ruled did not welcome him. Once, his stride had owned these marble floors. His voice had commanded entire departments. Now he walked through the lobby like a ghost wearing a man's skin. Eyes that had once adored him now lingered with mocking amusement. Whispers followed him like shadows. The fallen star had returned, but not to reclaim his throne. He was starting at the bottom. Grace Hale had made certain of it. She assigned him to a lowly analyst desk, buried beneath stacks of grunt work, a place where even interns smirked at him. Each task she handed him was calculated to crush pride and strip dignity. He wasn't just given work, he was given impossible work. Draft the quarterly models by morning, she instructed one day, sliding a folder across her glass desk. Adrian scanned the pages, his jaw tight. This is a week's worth of analysis. Grace arched a brow, sipping her coffee with deliberate calm. Then I suppose you'd better not waste time complaining. For a flicker of a moment, their eyes locked. He saw the cold triumph there, the blade of vengeance she wielded with effortless grace. And yet, he didn't back down. Fine, he muttered. You'll have it. She leaned back, smiling faintly. Good boy! It infuriated her that he didn't snap, that he didn't storm out or break beneath the pressure. Instead, Adrian stayed late, burning under the fluorescent lights long after the office emptied. Grace sometimes passed by his desk at midnight, heels clicking against the marble, only to find him still working, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, but unrelenting. She told herself she didn't care. But the sight of him bent over those papers, fighting like a soldier in exile, lodged in her chest like a splinter. And others noticed too. Whispers spread that Adrian Cross, even stripped of glory, still carried brilliance. His reports outshone veterans. His strategies when he dared slip them between the lines were sharper than the boards. It irritated Grace more than she would admit. She had brought him back to watch him crawl, not to spark admiration again. And yet, admiration wasn't the only thing sparking. Every argument between them carried more heat than it should. Every brush of proximity when she leaned across his desk left the air heavy with tension. Their history wasn't dead. It breathed between them, hot and dangerous, threatening to ignite. But Grace would not allow herself to forget. He had broken her. She had built her empire on the ashes of his betrayal. Desire was weakness, and she was never weak. Still, temptation clawed. One night, she found herself staring at her reflection in the office window, city lights sprawling behind her. She hated the way her pulse quickened when she thought of him. She hated how her mind replayed his voice from years ago, not the cruel dismissal, but the softer tones he used when no one else was around. But hate wasn't the only thing she felt, and that terrified her. She wasn't the only one with suspicion stirring. Marcus Hale, her younger brother, and the only person she trusted beyond herself, had been watching Adrian closely. He saw the way the man shielded him from trouble when whispers of a brewing scandal threatened to tarnish his reputation. One evening, Marcus confronted his sister. "You act like he's the enemy," Marcus said, pacing her office, his youthful face taut with frustration. "But I've seen him take hits to protect me." He's not who you think he island. Grace's gaze turned to ice. Don't be fooled. Adrian Cross is a master manipulator. That's how he's survived this long. Marcus shook his head. Or maybe he was just forced into things we don't know about. People change, Grace. You of all people should understand that. She cut him off sharply. Enough! But the seed was planted, gnawing at her resolve. Her doubts deepened when she received an anonymous message one night slipped under her door, typed on plain paper. Adrian never betrayed you. He was forced. No signature, no trace. Just a blade of truth, or perhaps deception slashing through her certainty. Grace's hands trembled as she held the note. She told herself it was a trick, a manipulation. Yet the memory of Adrian's haunted eyes, the way regret flickered unbidden when she taunted him, would not leave her mind. The next night, the storm inside her finally broke. Adrian had been summoned to her office after hours. She told herself it was for work, another cruel task to throw at him. But the second he stepped inside, the air shifted. She rose from behind her desk, circling him like a predator. He stood tall, though shadows of exhaustion darkened his eyes. You think I don't see what you're doing? She hissed, her voice low, edged with something more dangerous than anger. You play the martyr, the fallen hero, hoping I'll feel pity, hoping I'll forget what you did. Adrian's jaw flexed, his voice rough. I don't need your pity. I don't need forgiveness. But I'll prove to you that I'm not the man you think I am. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Prove? You can't erase the past. I can't erase it, he admitted, stepping closer. But I can show you that it wasn't the whole truth. She should have stepped back. Instead, she found herself rooted, breath shallow, his nearness pulling at something she had locked away for years. You broke me once, she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. His gaze softened, raw and unguarded. And I've been breaking ever since. The silence that followed was electric, heavy with unspoken words and unshed tears. And then like two forces colliding, they were inches apart, their lips trembling on the edge of surrender. But Grace tore herself away, shoving him back with sudden fury. Her chest rose and fell as if she'd run a mile. You'll never touch me again, she spat, though her eyes burned with a war she couldn't name. Adrian didn't argue. He just looked at her broken, defiant, unyielding, and left without another word. Grace sank into her chair, clutching the edge of the desk, as though it were the only thing anchoring her. Her empire felt suddenly fragile, built not on steel and stone but on lies and shadows. And somewhere in the dark corners of the city, someone was watching, waiting, pulling strings she hadn't yet seen. Because the note wasn't a lie. The betrayal that had fueled her rise wasn't the full story. And the truth was about to shatter everything. Grace had built her empire on the certainty of one truth. Adrian Cross had betrayed her. His cruelty had been the spark, his mockery the wound, his dismissal the fire that burned her into steel. But now that certainty trembled, the anonymous note haunted her. Adrian never betrayed you. He was forced. She tried to ignore it, tried to bury herself in work, but the words crept into every silence. And when she saw him, bent over endless spreadsheets, stubbornly enduring her punishments with grit rather than bitterness, the lies she had lived by began to unravel. Grace was not a woman who relied on whispers. She relied on proof. And so, late one night, she broke her own rules. In the private archives of the company, hidden behind layers of encrypted files, she searched. Her fingers trembled as she pulled up records from years ago, the very quarter when her dismissal had gutted her. Transfers, board minutes, confidential memos. At first, the screen blurred with meaningless numbers. But then she found it. Blackmail. Threats. Not directed at her, directed at him. Vivian Locke, her ally. Her cold, sharp confidant who had whispered advice in her ear for years. Vivian had orchestrated the downfall of Adrian Cross. She had forced his hand, threatening his family with ruin if he didn't cut Grace loose. The humiliation that had forged Grace's empire had not been born from Adrian's arrogance alone. It had been engineered, manipulated. Grace sat back, the weight of it pressing on her chest until she could barely breathe. She whispered to the empty office. All this time, I hated him for something he didn't choose. But hatred was not so easily erased. Even if Adrian hadn't wielded the knife of betrayal by choice, he had still cut her. The scar remained. The question was no longer whether he had betrayed her. The question was whether she could forgive. Her turmoil only grew when Adrian confronted her days later, rain soaked from a storm outside. He burst into her office, his restraint finally snapping. "Why are you doing this to me?" he demanded, voice rough, shoulders tense with exhaustion. Grace rose slowly, mask slipping just enough to reveal the fire beneath. "Because you deserve it." "No," he shot back, eyes blazing. "You want me to pay because it's easier than admitting you still care." The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She forced a laugh, sharp as broken glass. "Care? Don't flatter yourself." But Adrian stepped closer, closing the distance between them with every heartbeat. His voice dropped, raw and stripped of pride. "I've been paying for years, Grace. Every night, every day. I see your face in every failure. I hear your voice in every silence. And I know I destroyed the only thing that mattered to me. I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to know I never stopped loving you." Her breath caught, traitorously. The storm outside raged, lightning slashing across the skyline, thunder rumbling like her pulse. "You broke me," she whispered. "I broke myself," he said, so close she could feel the heat of him, the sincerity thrumming through his words. And then, like a dam bursting, their lips collided. The kiss was violent, desperate, born of rage and longing tangled into one. Years of bitterness poured out in that one searing moment. Her hands fisted in his shirt, his arms crushed her against him as though letting go would end them both. For one breathless heartbeat, Grace forgot revenge. She forgot betrayal. She remembered only the boy who had once been her dream, and the man who was now her undoing. But the spell shattered as the door flew open. Marcus stood there, eyes wide, betrayal written across his young face. "Grace," he said, his voice strangled. "What are you doing?" She tore herself away from Adrian, her lips trembling, her chest heaving. "Marcus!" But her brother's fury drowned her words. "He's the enemy! And while you're drowning in old feelings, Vivian is planning to strip everything from you." Grace froze. "What?" Marcus slammed a folder onto her desk. Inside were fresh documents, boardroom strategies, hidden alliances, forged accounts. Vivian Locke was preparing a coup. She was engineering a hostile takeover to steal the company from under Grace's feet. And Adrian was listed as the linchpin witness. Grace's blood ran cold. Marcus's voice cracked with urgency. "She's using him! Again, if he sides with her, she'll have enough to crush you." Adrian's face hardened with conflict. He looked at Grace, then at the folder, then back at her. "I didn't agree to this," he said, voice taut with desperation. "She's trying to corner me. She thinks she owns me the way she did before. But I won't." Grace cut him off, voice trembling with fury. "Won't you? Or is this just history repeating itself?" The words hurt him. She saw it. His jaw clenched, his eyes shadowed with old guilt. "I won't betray you again," he said, low and certain. But Grace had heard promises before, and promises had destroyed her. The board meeting came sooner than she expected. The room crackled with tension as Vivian Locke presented her case with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Charts, numbers, accusations, all designed to paint Grace as reckless, unfit to lead. The empire Grace had built trembled under the weight of Vivian's venom. And then came the moment. "Mr. Cross," Vivian purred, her voice a dagger wrapped in silk. "Would you share your testimony?" Every eye turned to Adrian. Grace sat at the head of the table, her nails biting into the wood, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The man she had loved. The man she had hated. The man who stood now at the edge of salvation or destruction. Would he save her empire, or damn her again? The silence stretched like a noose tightening around her throat. And then Adrian rose, his shadow falling long across the boardroom floor. The boardroom was silent, the kind of silence that crackled with tension and sharpened every breath into a blade. Vivian Locke stood at the far end of the table, her smile poised and venomous, a viper ready to strike. She had presented her case with lethal precision, painting Grace Hale as reckless, vindictive, unfit to lead. The board had listened, wary eyes flicking between predator and prey. And now, every gaze turned to Adrian Cross. Vivian's voice was velvet over steel. "Mr. Cross, You hold the final piece of truth. The board awaits your testimony. Grace sat unmoving at the head of the table, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Her empire, her pride, her very identity balanced on the man who had once shattered her. Adrian rose slowly, his movements deliberate, controlled, as though he bore the weight of 1,000 eyes. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. But Grace knew him too well. She saw the storm beneath his composure. Vivian tilted her head, smug confidence glinting in her eyes. She was certain of victory, certain Adrian would seal Grace's fate. Grace wanted to believe otherwise. But history whispered like a ghost, reminding her of the night he had mocked her dreams, the day he had cast her aside. Adrian cleared his throat, his voice steady. I was asked to testify against Grace Hale, to provide evidence that she abused her power, manipulated numbers, acted unfit as CEO. A murmur rippled through the board. Grace sat rigid, every muscle taut. Adrian's gaze shifted, locking on Grace. For a moment, time froze. The room, the board, Vivian's expectant smirk all fell away. There was only him and her, the battlefield of their past burning between them. Then Adrian spoke. And here is the truth. Yes, Grace Hale is ruthless. Yes, she is relentless. She has clawed her way to power with a ferocity none of you can match. But everything she built in the open. She did not cheat. She did not steal. She did not manipulate. She earned it. The board stirred, shocked. Vivian's smile flickered. Adrian pressed on, voice ringing with conviction. The real betrayal lies not with her, but with Vivian Locke. Years ago, she blackmailed me. She forced my hand to humiliate Grace, to cut her loose. She threatened my family if I didn't comply, and I was weak. I obeyed. I betrayed the woman I loved, and I have carried that sin ever since. Gasps cut through the air like gunfire. Executives turned, eyes wide, murmurs erupting. Vivian's mask cracked, her smirk twisting into fury. Lies! Baseless lies from a ruined man. Adrian slammed a folder onto the table, the very documents Grace had uncovered. Proof. Transfers, threats, memos. She engineered everything. She sabotaged me, sabotaged Grace, and now she wants to sabotage this company. The board erupted into chaos. Voices clashed, chairs scraped, whispers hissed. Grace sat frozen, her breath caught in her throat. He had done it. He had confessed, laid bare his greatest shame, sacrificed his reputation to save her. Vivian's composure shattered. She lunged forward, voice shrill. You'll regret this, Adrian! You'll regret ever crossing me! But the damage was done. The board members turned their backs on her, eyes cold with betrayal. Security moved forward at Grace's nod, escorting Vivian out despite her protests. And then, silence fell again. Grace rose, her figure regal and unshaken though her heart thundered. The board will convene to confirm, but let there be no doubt this empire remains mine. The meeting dissolved in a blur of motion, voices, footsteps, but Grace barely heard any of it. Her focus was on Adrian, who now stood apart, shoulders heavy, eyes downcast. When the room emptied, only the two of them remained. Grace crossed the distance slowly, each step echoing in the vast chamber. She stopped before him, searching his face. You destroyed yourself to save me, she said softly. Adrian lifted his gaze, pain etched deep. I owed you that much. You built everything from the ruins I left you. If I had stayed silent, you'd have lost it all again. I couldn't let history repeat itself. Her voice trembled, stripped of ice for the first time in years. And what about you? What do you have left now? He gave a faint, broken smile. Nothing, but maybe that's what I deserve. Something inside her cracked. For years she had dreamed of this, of him groveling, of him destroyed, of him suffering as she once suffered. And now, here he was, a man stripped bare, offering nothing but truth, but vengeance tasted bitter where she had expected it to taste sweet. Grace lifted her hand, hesitant, trembling, then let it rest against his cheek. You're wrong, she whispered. You don't deserve nothing. You deserve me breaking apart every time I remembered you. You deserve the fire I lit to burn you out of me. But you don't deserve to be alone anymore. Adrian's breath hitched, eyes searching hers, raw and disbelieving. Grace, she silenced him with a kiss. It was not the kiss of fury they had shared before, not born of rage and desperation. This kiss was softer, deeper, born of release. A kiss that tasted of years lost, of forgiveness found, of love rediscovered in the ashes. When they parted, her forehead rested against his. "I built this empire to prove I didn't need you," she murmured. "But the truth is, I never stopped wanting you." He closed his eyes, a tear slipping free. "And I never stopped loving you." They stood there, two souls bound by scars and fire, the city lights blazing around them. The empire she had forged was no longer a monument to betrayal. It was the stage for redemption. In the weeks that followed, Vivian's schemes unraveled entirely. Her allies deserted her, her power crumbled, and her name became a warning whispered in corporate corridors. Marcus, once distrustful, stood beside Grace, finally believing Adrian's loyalty. And Grace no longer let alone. Side by side, she and Adrian rebuilt the company stronger than before. He had no title, no crown, but he had her trust. Together, they turned the ashes of betrayal into the foundation of something unbreakable. One night, standing on the balcony of her penthouse, Grace looked out at the city that had once seemed so cold, so vast. Adrian stood behind her, arms circling her waist, his lips brushing her temple. For the first time in years, she felt at peace, not because she had won, not because she had destroyed her enemies, but because she had chosen forgiveness over fire, love over vengeance. Her empire was no longer built on hate, it was built on them. And this time, nothing, not betrayal, not sabotage, not even the ghosts of the past could tear it apart. The story of Grace Hale and Adrian Cross was no longer one of broken dreams. It was a story of redemption, rebirth, and the kind of love that rises stronger after it's been shattered. To summarize this story, it began with betrayal, a woman mocked and cast aside by the man she trusted. Instead of breaking, she rose higher, returning as the powerful CEO of an empire. When he reappeared, humbled and desperate, old wounds clashed with lingering desire as sabotage and secrets threatened everything. In the end, the truth was revealed. Vengeance gave way to forgiveness, and what began in ruin transformed into a story of redemption, power, and love reborn from ashes. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe my channel for more dramatic, intense romances. Your support means so much to me. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to share the next story with you.